There's a moment in everyone's life when the ground beneath their feet disappears, when everything they thought they knew crumbles, when they find themselves in a darkness so complete they can't remember what light looks like. If you're in that place right now, if you're going through your own personal hell, I want you to know something. Carl Jung would tell you that this might be the most important moment of your entire life, not despite the suffering, but because of it. Today, we're going to explore what one of the most brilliant minds in psychology believed about our darkest moments, and why he thought that when we descend into hell, we're actually being called toward something greater. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending pain doesn't hurt. This is about understanding what's really happening in the depths of your suffering, and why Jung believed that the way out isn't around the darkness, but through it. So if you're struggling right now, if you're in the middle of your own night sea journey, stay with me. Because what Jung discovered about the human psyche might completely change how you see what you're going through. Jung had a concept that sounds almost cruel when you first hear it, that psychological suffering is not just random bad luck or something to be avoided at all costs. He believed that when we find ourselves in hell, it's often because our psyche is trying to force us to confront something we've been avoiding, something we've pushed down into what he called the shadow. Think about it. Most of us spend our lives building an identity, a persona that we show to the world. We decide who we are, what we believe, what we want. We create a story about ourselves that feels safe and manageable. But here's the problem. In creating that story, we inevitably leave parts of ourselves out. The parts that don't fit, the parts that scare us, the parts that contradict the image we want to maintain. These rejected parts don't disappear. They sink into the unconscious, into the shadow, where they gain power. And eventually, Jung believed, the psyche can't maintain the split anymore. The pressure builds until something breaks. This is when we descend into hell. Maybe it's a crisis that seems to come out of nowhere, a depression that has no obvious cause, an anxiety that won't respond to logic, a feeling that everything in your life is wrong, even when it looks right on paper. Jung would say this isn't a malfunction. This is your psyche trying to wake you up. He wrote about this in his own life. In his late 30s, Jung himself descended into what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He experienced visions, heard voices, felt like he was losing his mind. He was going through his own hell, but instead of running from it or trying to medicate it away, he did something radical. He engaged with it. He drew the images he saw. He wrote down the voices he heard. He treated his inner chaos not as an enemy, but as a teacher. This period, which lasted several years, became the foundation for his entire psychological system. The concepts of the shadow, the anima and animus, the collective unconscious, individuation, all of it emerged from his willingness to descend into his own darkness and explore what he found there. When you're going through hell right now, Jung would ask you, what is trying to emerge? What have you been refusing to see? What part of yourself have you exiled that's now demanding to be integrated? The descent into hell, in Jungian terms, is often the beginning of what he called the individuation process, the journey toward becoming your authentic, whole self. And it has to begin with a descent because we can't integrate what we won't acknowledge. We can't become whole while we're still running from half of ourselves. Let's go deeper into this concept of the shadow, because understanding it is crucial to understanding why you might be suffering right now. Jung defined the shadow as the parts of ourselves we don't want to admit exist. It contains not just negative traits, our anger, jealousy, selfishness, cruelty, but also positive qualities we've been taught to suppress. Maybe you were raised to be humble, so you pushed down your ambition. Maybe you were taught that anger is bad, so you repressed your ability to set boundaries. Maybe you learned that being too happy or too expressive made others uncomfortable, so you dimmed your light. All of this goes into the shadow. And here's what Jung discovered. The shadow doesn't stay passive. It acts. It influences us from the unconscious in ways we don't recognize. Have you ever exploded in anger over something small? That's often the shadow breaking through. Have you ever sabotaged something good in your life for no logical reason? Shadow. Have you ever felt an irrational hatred toward someone who, when you really think about it, embodies a quality you've denied in yourself? Shadow. When we refuse to acknowledge the shadow, Jung believed, it eventually forces the issue. This is often what the descent into hell is really about. The shadow has grown so powerful, has accumulated so much unlived life, that it can no longer be contained. Your current suffering might be the shadow's way of getting your attention. It's saying, look at me, acknowledge me, integrate me. I'm part of you whether you like it or not, and denying me only makes me stronger. And here's the paradox. The things we fear most about our shadow often contain the very qualities we need to become whole. Jung observed that when people finally confronted their shadow and integrated those rejected parts, they didn't become worse people. They became more complete, more authentic, more alive. The angry person, who was taught to suppress all aggression, might find, in their shadow, the ability to stand up for themselves. The person who's always been nice might discover in their shadow the power to say no. The person who's played small their whole life might find their ambition waiting in the darkness, ready to be reclaimed. So if you're in hell right now, ask yourself, what am I being forced to face? What have I spent years running from? What quality in myself am I finally being asked to acknowledge? The answer might frighten you. Jung would say that's how you know you're on the right track. Jung was fascinated by mythology, and he noticed a pattern that appeared in cultures across the world: the death and rebirth motif. The hero descends into the underworld. The initiate dies symbolically and is reborn. The shaman experiences a psychological dismemberment before being reconstructed with new powers. He came to believe this wasn't just metaphor. It was a map of psychological transformation that the human psyche has always understood at a deep level. When you're going through hell, Jung would tell you that you're in the death phase. Something in you is dying. Maybe it's an old identity that no longer fits. Maybe it's a relationship that's run its course. Maybe it's a belief system that's been revealed as false. Maybe it's the image you had of yourself, the story you told about who you were and what your life meant. This death is excruciating because we cling to what's familiar, even when it's killing us. We'd rather stay in a known misery than face the unknown that comes with transformation. Our ego, our conscious sense of self, fights desperately to maintain control, to keep things as they are. But Jung observed that the psyche is smarter than the ego. When transformation is necessary for growth, the psyche will create a crisis that forces the issue. This is why sometimes our worst moments come exactly when we thought we had everything figured out. The psyche says, actually no. That version of you has gone as far as it can go. Now it has to die, so something new can be born. The death phase feels like hell, because we don't know what comes next. We're in the void, the gap between what was and what will be. Jung called this the nigredo, the blackening, using alchemical terms. The alchemists believed you had to dissolve base material in darkness before you could transform it into gold. Jung saw the same process in the psyche. You're being dissolved right now. Your old structures are breaking down. It feels like annihilation because, in a sense, it is. But Jung would remind you, this is how transformation happens. The caterpillar must dissolve completely, must become literal soup before it can reorganize as a butterfly. The key is not to abort the process, not to desperately try to rebuild what was, not to numb yourself with distractions or addictions or manic activity. The key is to allow the death to complete itself, trusting that rebirth will follow. This requires tremendous courage. It requires faith not in a religious sense necessarily, but in the sense of trusting that the psyche knows what it's doing, that this destruction is purposeful. And here's what Jung promised. If you can endure the death phase, if you can stay conscious through the dissolution, what emerges on the other side will be more authentic, more whole, more truly you than anything you've been before. The hell you're going through isn't the end of your story. It's the middle. It's the transition. It's the crucible. Jung spent his career studying what he called the individuation process, the journey toward becoming a complete, integrated person. And he made a startling observation. Most people never complete this journey. Most people live their entire lives as fragments of what they could be, playing roles, maintaining personas, never confronting the deeper layers of their psyche. Why? Because individuation requires descending into hell. It requires facing the shadow. It requires allowing parts of ourselves to die. And most people will do anything to avoid that pain. But you don't have a choice anymore, do you? You're already in hell. You're already facing the pain. So Jung would tell you, don't waste this. Don't just survive it and then go back to sleep. Use it. Let it transform you. The suffering you're experiencing is the psyche's call to wholeness. It's saying, you can't keep living as a fragment anymore. You can't keep pretending. You can't keep avoiding the depths. It's time to become who you really are. This process isn't about becoming perfect. Jung didn't believe in perfection. He believed in wholeness, which is very different. Wholeness includes the light and the shadow, the acceptable and the unacceptable, the conscious and the unconscious. It means embracing the full spectrum of what it means to be human. When we answer the call to wholeness, we stop trying to be the sanitized, socially acceptable version of ourselves. We stop performing. We stop hiding. We bring all of ourselves, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, into consciousness and learn to live with all of it. This is radical work. It goes against everything society teaches us. We're told to cultivate our strengths and hide our weaknesses, to project success and bury failure, to be positive and deny negativity. Jung said this is exactly backward. The path to psychological health runs straight through the things we least want to acknowledge. If you're in hell right now, you're being given a chance that many people never get. The chance to stop pretending. The chance to meet yourself as you truly are. The chance to build a life based on authenticity rather than illusion. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's terrifying. But Jung would tell you it's also sacred. You're being invited into the most important work a human being can do. The work of becoming conscious, of becoming whole, of becoming yourself. So what do you actually do when you're in hell? Jung wasn't just a theorist. He developed practical methods for working with the unconscious. Let me share some of his wisdom that might help you navigate your current darkness. First, Jung was a strong advocate of what he called active imagination. This means engaging with the images, symbols, and figures that arise from your unconscious. If you're having disturbing dreams, don't just dismiss them. Write them down. Draw them. Ask them what they want. Treat them as messengers from the deeper layers of your psyche. When Jung was going through his own descent, he would sit down and ask, "What is the unconscious trying to tell me?" Then he would allow images and fantasies to arise, and he would interact with them. He drew mandalas. He had conversations with inner figures. He treated his inner world as real and worthy of exploration. You can do this too. Set aside time to simply be with your inner experience. Journal without censoring yourself. Draw or paint even if you think you're not artistic. Let the images that haunt you come out onto paper where you can see them and work with them. Second, Jung believed in the power of ritual and symbol. He noticed that traditional cultures had rituals for times of transition and crisis, initiation ceremonies, vision quests, pilgrimages. Modern culture has largely lost these, and Jung thought we were poorer for it. You can create your own rituals. Maybe you mark the end of each difficult day by lighting a candle and acknowledging what you've endured. Maybe you create a physical representation of what you're trying to release. Maybe you develop a morning practice that connects you to something larger than yourself. Ritual works because it speaks the language of the unconscious, which communicates in symbols rather than logic. When you're in hell, rational analysis often doesn't help, but symbol and ritual can provide a container for your experience, a way to honor its depth without being overwhelmed by it. Third, Jung emphasized the importance of holding the tension of opposites. When we're suffering, we want resolution. We want the pain to end. But Jung observed that real transformation happens when we can hold contradictory truths at the same time without collapsing into one or the other. You might need to hold the truth that you're in terrible pain and that this pain has meaning, that you feel lost and that you're exactly where you need to be, that you want to give up and that you're being called to continue. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create a third thing from the tension between two opposites. Don't try to resolve the paradoxes too quickly. Sit with them. Let them work on you. This is how consciousness expands. Fourth, consider finding a guide. Jung himself went through his descent alone, but he later said he wouldn't recommend it. He spent the rest of his career training analysts specifically to help people navigate the unconscious. If you can find a Jungian analyst or a therapist who understands depth psychology, they can be invaluable. But even without professional help, you can find guides in other forms. Read Jung's work, especially his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Read mythology and fairy tales with new eyes, looking for patterns that mirror your experience. Pay attention to what stories or images call to you. They're often reflecting something in your own process. Here's something Jung observed that might sustain you through the darkness. The treasure is always in the cave. The dragon always guards the gold. In every myth where a hero descends into the underworld or faces a terrible monster, they always find something valuable in the place of greatest danger. This isn't just story structure. Jung believed it reflected a psychological truth. The very place we least want to go, the experience we most want to avoid, contains something we desperately need. What might that treasure be for you? Maybe it's a strength you didn't know you had. Maybe it's a truth you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a part of yourself you've kept locked away. Maybe it's a capacity for depth and feeling that superficial happiness could never give you. Jung talked about how his own descent, as terrifying as it was, gave him access to the collective unconscious, the deep layers of the psyche that we all share. His suffering opened doorways to wisdom that he spent the rest of his life exploring and sharing. The worst period of his life became the source of his greatest contribution to humanity. I'm not saying your suffering is a gift. I'm not asking you to be grateful for it, but I am suggesting, as Jung did, that it might be carrying something you need, that when you finally emerge from this hell, you might bring something valuable with you. People who've never descended into darkness often remain superficial, no matter how successful they are. They don't have depth. They don't have wisdom. They haven't been broken and rebuilt. They haven't met their shadow and survived. But you're different now. You're being forged in fire. You're being broken open. And while that's happening, seeds are being planted in the cracks. You're developing capacities that people who've never suffered simply don't have. Empathy, wisdom, resilience, authenticity, depth. The hell you're going through is terrible, but it's also doing something to you, changing you in ways you won't fully understand until later. Jung would tell you to pay attention to what this experience is teaching you, because these lessons, hard-won and costly as they are, will become the foundation for everything you build afterward. Eventually, if you stay conscious through the descent, you will begin to return, not to where you were. You can never go back to that, but to the upper world, transformed, Jung called this the integration phase. The hero returns from the underworld. The initiate emerges from the death lodge. The alchemical process reaches its final stage. You bring back what you've learned in the darkness and incorporate it into your conscious life. This phase has its own challenges. You've changed, but the world hasn't. People want you to be who you were. Old roles and relationships may no longer fit. You might feel alienated, like you're living in two worlds. The surface world that goes on as if nothing happened, and the deeper world you've discovered. Jung experienced this too. After his confrontation with the unconscious, he had to figure out how to live as a psychiatrist, husband, and father while also honoring the profound truths he'd discovered in his descent. He had to integrate his experience without being overwhelmed by it or abandoning it to return to normalcy. You'll have to do the same. The key is to stay connected to what you've learned while also functioning in the world. This might mean changing how you live, what you value, who you spend time with. It might mean setting new boundaries or pursuing new directions. The person you were before the descent couldn't have made these changes, but the person you're becoming can. Remember, the point of going through hell isn't to come back and tell everyone how terrible it was. It's to bring back the treasure, to live differently because of what you've learned, to use your hard-won wisdom to help others, to create meaning from suffering. Jung believed that people who successfully navigate the individuation process, who descend and return, often feel called to help others on the same journey. They become the wounded healers, the guides who can say, "I've been there," with genuine authority. Maybe that's part of your future. Maybe the hell you're going through now is preparing you to be someone's lifeline later. Maybe your suffering will become the source of your compassion, your wisdom, your ability to sit with others in their darkness without trying to fix them or make it go away. This is how suffering can be redemptive, not by being good in itself, but by being transformed into something that serves. Not by happening for a reason that you can understand now, but by being given meaning through what you choose to do with it afterward. If you're going through hell right now, Carl Jung would tell you this. Don't run. Don't numb. Don't bypass. Go through it. Descend consciously. Face what you find there. Allow the death to happen. Trust the process, even when you can't see where it's leading. Your psyche is wiser than your ego. Your soul knows what your personality doesn't. And this terrible, painful, disorienting experience you're having might be the most important thing that ever happens to you. Not because suffering is good, but because it's demanding that you become more than you were. The old version of yourself is dying. Let it go. Something new is trying to be born. Make space for it. And know that on the other side of this hell, if you walk through it with consciousness and courage, you'll emerge as someone more whole, more authentic, more deeply human than you ever thought possible. The descent into hell is the path to transformation. This is what Jung discovered in his own life, and what he spent his career helping others understand. Your suffering has depth. It has meaning. It's trying to tell you something. Listen to it. Learn from it. Let it change you. And when you finally emerge, and you will emerge, you'll carry the treasure with you. The wisdom earned in darkness. The strength forged in fire. The wholeness born from brokenness. You're not going through hell for nothing. You're going through hell to become who you were always meant to be.